Hello, I'm Dr. Sean Orr. Thank you for joining me today to discuss the concept of physician disruption and restoration. For many physicians today, their quality of life has been reduced to a record low. Their family lives and their own health have deteriorated because of high stress and little time to take care of themselves. Physicians are working harder than ever, only to find their incomes reduced and personal wealth threatened. Burdensome regulations and administrative demands rob so many doctors of their time and interfere with their ability to deliver good patient care. Administrators dictate how they practice, how many patients they must see, what tests to order, and what devices to use. Physicians are frustrated by how it's becoming almost impossible to order certain tests and medications, and by the feeling that they are under surveillance by regulators and enforcers. Many are fighting legal battles just to continue the ability to practice or have run up against their state's medical board because of the effects of battles with their local hospitals. Doctors operate under the constant fear that attorneys will sue and collect big just for mere allegations of deviations from the standard of care. Physicians are being publicly shamed like never before, caught in the middle of the narcotics wars, succumbing to boundary violations, subjected to the embarrassment of wrong-side surgery. They're called to the carpet by hospital administrators because they've complained about system issues that negatively affected the quality of their patients' care, because they tried to suggest fixes and make changes that weren't appreciated. Physicians have been exposed to any of several of the dozen iterations of problems caused by the interface with the healthcare system. Today, half of all physicians are burning out because of the toxic healthcare environment, and they're being led to believe it's their own fault, their own ability to cope. So it should be no surprise that physicians have one of the highest rates of suicide of any profession. On average, one doctor takes his or her own life every day. Every year, we lose 2 medical school classes worth of doctors to suicide. And annually, nearly 1 million patients receive suboptimal care due to the doctor's self-inflicted deaths. But suicide is just the end result of a long and predictable process of burnout. The stages of burnout can be mapped out, and they have a distinctly negative effect on your ability to practice effectively. Burnout clouds your judgment, it reduces your decision-making ability, it impairs your sense of restraint and inhibition. And there are important reasons why half of all doctors in our country today are burning out. The effects of mounting regulations over the last 20 years have devastated physicians' ability to practice freely. This has only accelerated over the last 6 years, leaving physicians feeling trapped, frustrated, and impotent. Mergers and acquisitions and government intrusion have caused us to be herded into employment arrangements with hospitals or large conglomerates. The Healthcare Quality Improvement Act and the Patient Safety Quality Improvement Act have created administrative burdens that have eroded the ability of doctors to practice. And these legislative actions have given cover to hospitals, protecting them while they run roughshod over physicians who have been stripped of their rights to due process. The result of these regulations has been an explosion in the number of healthcare administrators over the past 20 years. This first was stimulated by the passage of the HCQIA in 1986 and further exacerbated by the passage of the PSQIA in 2005. It might not be a surprise to see that the percentage of growth in U.S. healthcare spending per capita has also mapped out according to this explosion of healthcare administrators. Many doctors feel that this explosive rise in the number of healthcare administrators has drained the system of value. Micromanagement has driven physicians to scale back quality and to become reluctant to commit to making diagnoses. Because if you commit to a diagnosis, you must commit to a treatment. And treating a patient means encumbering an expense to the system on your behalf as a doctor. The emergence of big data and data transparency have put a microscope on doctors, highlighting certain metrics in isolation that make us look bad, such as the amount of money we are responsible for in prescriptions. For example, a highly respected neurologist in Atlanta was recently highlighted by National Public Radio as being a top prescriber in 2014, writing for $11.5 million worth of drugs that year. The story did not take into account other factors, such as the fact that he works at a major referral center for brain-injured patients, or that he may have streamlined systems to optimize care, resulting in a greater than average throughput of patients, that he may have been delivering massive value to his group of patients. The story also did not focus on all the good that he's done for his patients, keeping them healthy and productive members of society. The story did not even consider looking at expenditures through the lens of value. Instead of casting a negative light, the story could have congratulated him on his attentive care that may have saved tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in burdensome expenses to the system. But that narrative would have gone against the current agenda, which is to demonize doctors, devalue us, and make us susceptible to professional attacks from all quarters. These attacks by the media are not well-meaning. They are meant to scare physicians out of committing to diagnoses and treatment for fear that we will be singled out and publicly shamed or worse. And there is so much worse that can happen. I'm telling you this from personal experience. If your practice style varies just a bit from a very narrow channel of what is considered acceptable, in other words cheap, you run the risk of loss of hospital privileges, government fraud investigations, reputation attacks in the media, plaintiff attorney attacks, and medical board investigations and actions. But these are not rare one-off events. These occur much more commonly than you might know. Much of this has stayed in the dark because your colleagues are afraid to talk about it when it happens to them. After all, doctors are selected for medical school in part because of our compulsive tendencies and pursuit of perfection. To reveal publicly the attacks we are under would be to go against our need to be flawless. So we all trudge along, trying to make ends meet, suffering under the heavy hand of administrators and government bureaucrats. But you know, and I know, patients aren't getting their money's worth. So at the end of the day, those who suffer the most are our patients. We're all desperately awaiting a change in the system, someone special to come along and fix everything, a return to how things used to be. But the truth is there's no going back. Physician disruption is well underway, and it is only going to accelerate in the face of technological disruption. So ask yourself, how are you going to cope when medical homes become hyper-efficient, allowing them to actually reduce the number of primary care doctors needed? Or telemedicine makes the outpatient visit a quaint relic of the past? Or workflow automation and artificial intelligence reduce the number of needed radiologists and pathologists by 90%? How are you going to cope when machine learning algorithms start to make more precise and accurate diagnoses than doctors, especially on the hard cases? Or workflow solutions emerge that don't require the presence or input of a doctor? Or clinical research protocols become automated, avoiding the need of a physician's input, guidance, or case adjudication? How are you going to cope when the transition to value-based healthcare upends your practice style and business model, potentially draining what tiny sliver is left in your capital and cognitive margins? These are but a handful of examples of some of the coming changes due to physician disruption. And we can argue all day about whether physician disruption is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a reality of life as a physician, and now it's up to you to decide how you want to handle its effects on your life. You really have three options. First, you can think about redesigning your practice, you can repurpose yourself, or you can retire. If you would consider the option to retire, do you have a soft landing that will sustain you? Do you have a plan to transition your patients, or are you trapped by your practice? If you're considering the option to repurpose, do you know what industry appeals to you? Do you know how to start your search? Do you have the cash flow to support the transition? And if you would consider the option to redesign, what are your margins and financial targets? What will you restructure to improve efficiency? How will you implement automation and at the same time keep the patient at the center of your focus? These are the three options that you have in front of you. And given the incredible pressure that has been placed on physicians, any decision you make will be stressful. Physician stress is at an all-time high. It's so bad that even the traditional stakeholders are finally sitting up and paying attention. A new alliance has formed to address the issue of suicide amongst physicians in training, involving the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the Mayo Clinic. Now, this is to help young trainees who haven't even been out into the raw environment of practice yet. They haven't known the sting of the loss of income in bankruptcy, or social isolation and public humiliation, yet the pressures are spilling over into even their young lives. So thank goodness that somebody is finally sitting up and paying attention to young doctors and their experience with physician disruption. But what about you? How are you coping with physician disruption? Well, you should not despair. There are many strategies that can help you. What it really comes down to is maintaining a positive mindset coupled with opportunities to make a difference by applying your knowledge. I'm speaking from personal experience again. I'm Dr. Sean Orr. I've personally experienced almost every possible angle of physician disruption. In 2011, my career as a clinician was completely upended. My ability to practice was crushed. When the effects of healthcare reform hit, I unwittingly became the poster child for disrupted physicians. I was targeted by my competitors, my employer, the government, plaintiffs' attorneys, the insurance company, and regulators. It was overwhelming. You see, I was in a prominent position of leadership, as section chief of neurology for a large community hospital system, and as the independent neurologist for the local NFL franchise, I was a public figure. I was involved in guiding industry, and I sat on multiple boards of directors. I frequently traveled and engaged in public speaking, advocating tirelessly for my patients. I routinely worked 18-hour days and participated in numerous administrative activities that demanded my time and competed with activities of patient care. I was involved in the implementation of clinical and administrative solutions to optimize patient care. I enjoyed significant influence, and my opinion mattered to my community. So when the effects of healthcare reform started to be felt by hospitals and insurers, I was asked to alter my practice style to effectively get in line with rationing care in order to cut costs. I was given an ultimatum: change your practice style now. This felt wrong. You see, over the years, I developed a practice style that involved deep thinking, active troubleshooting, and providing well-structured solutions that were designed to improve the neurological health of my patients. To compromise the care of my patients, to stay on the surface and avoid making diagnoses because of the subsequent cost of treatment, well, it felt ludicrous, really. Especially when the care I was delivering was high value, meaning that it paid off for my patients and society in general. I thought then, and I still do, that introducing disruptive innovations into the clinical environment would yield productivity gains that would offset the high costs of the care that I was rendering. I figured that the smart hospital administrators would see the argument my way. Boy, was I wrong. And boy, how I overestimated my own power. I quickly discovered just how much power the hospitals and insurance companies have to force doctors to change. When I refused to comply, I was dismissed in a way that was very public and embarrassing. And this set off a chain of events that ended up causing years of regulatory, legal, and financial fights. Much to my dismay, I was attacked in the media in a well-coordinated effort to ruin my reputation. It started locally, and through a well-designed series of moves by local plaintiff attorneys, it went to national news. My family was hounded at my home by the media. I was asked to stop practicing by my colleagues. In the process, I suffered burnout, loss of physical and emotional well-being, severed relationships, diminished financial well-being, loss of power, and diminished stature in my community. I was judged harshly, crucified in the media, dragged through the courts, and condemned by some of my former patients, all in the name of physician disruption. All because misguided system-wide structural changes were aligned to target physicians as cost centers and eliminate us from accruing more expense to the system. Nowhere in their equation was there a focus on the value that I was providing. The analysis was focused exclusively on cost. And being a disruptive innovator, my own experience with physician disruption just happened to be ahead of the curve, and the treatment that I received was dramatic, public, and draconian. The act of subjecting me to public humiliation for my style of practice was designed to gain compliance on the part of my peers in the community. I later learned that this is called fishbowl management strategy. It was designed this way to send a message to other physicians: get in line, or this will happen to you too. And it worked. Others fell in line as I sat there holding the smoldering remains of my career in my hands. Yet, when all was said and done, I've lived to tell about it. I have come to realize that in a strange twist of fate, the purpose of all my trials has been to help my fellow physicians. You see, at the peak of it all, I came to a fork in the road. After so much negativity and despair, and not having the clarity of vision at that time to understand where it was all coming from, I was about ready to give it all up. And I mean all of it. I just wanted the earth to swallow me up so that I wouldn't have to face any more pain. No more administrative attacks, no more media attacks, no more regulatory attacks, no more legal attacks, no more loss. It would have been very easy to give up what little I had left and walk away. All of the knowledge that I'd accumulated gone. All of the experience about the travesty of the sham peer review gone. All of the knowledge about handling whistleblower lawsuits and defending against malpractice actions. All of the knowledge about grappling with medical board actions and managing and recovering from burnout. All of the knowledge about the importance of family and friend connections and about how to regain a balanced life. All of the knowledge about how to turn around one's mindset, to gain a different perspective, to shift my frame of reference and start to think about how to live a different life. A life that would allow me to continue to help people, but from a different vantage point, where I could embrace technological disruption and actually start to put it to good use. A life that would allow me to help other doctors to reposition themselves for a happier, more joy-filled existence. A life full of contentment, balance, happiness, excitement, and expansion. A life where I could help fellow physicians to find a way out of their own darkness, confusion, despair, and difficulty. What a waste it would have been if I had walked away, when all of my knowledge could instead be put to good use to help other doctors going through the same trials and tribulations. It was when I finally made this realization that I became galvanized with a conviction to help physicians, to share my insights, to guard them from making the same mistakes that I made, to walk them safely through the minefield to the other side where they too could again find the joy in helping others. This was my big revelation. My why of helping physicians is so that they can recover and get restored to a place of effectiveness for their patients. I thought, what a great thing it would be to help elevate the standard of living of our communities by helping my fellow doctors to become whole again, to become restored. And this realization could not have come at a more crucial time. Physicians are suffering the consequences of disruption because we've become divided and vulnerable. We have come to view the healthcare dollar through the lens of scarcity, fear, and loss. This has opened the door to nefarious actors who are all too happy to prey on our fear and drive a wedge between us and our cherished patients. It's time to change. We must learn to let go of fear and not respond to intimidation. We must again start to look at patient care as a source of abundance, intellectual abundance, emotional abundance, spiritual abundance, and yes, financial abundance. We must embrace the notion that technological innovation and market-driven value will drive amazing abundance into our lives and into the lives of our patients. We must take charge and steer the direction of medicine once again, advocating for our patients in their pursuit of ideal health. We must usher in a big bang of value that will resolve the self-immolation that is destroying the doctor-patient relationship today. This will not be easy, but it is worthy. And it will take each and every doctor committing to a new existence on the other side of physician disruption. So next time you're baited to sell out your colleague to increase your patient base, ask yourself if the same won't happen to you next. Next time you have the opportunity to belittle or badmouth a colleague, stop and try to find a kind word instead, or polite silence if none comes to mind. Next time you find an attorney tempting you to undermine a colleague on baseless grounds, refuse. There's a better way to earn a living. Next time you're called to the carpet by a hospital administrator, don't acquiesce. Refuse to be treated with disdain. Fight back against dirty data and the sham peer review. And next time you see a colleague being smeared in the media, stand up and protest. Demand to know the motives of the report and find a way to build up, not tear down that disrupted physician. Because it very well may be you next on stage to be judged. Remember that we physicians more than anyone should embody the ideals of empathy, civility, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, and charity. So let's get to work and start to rebuild the practice of medicine so that the next generation of physicians won't have to go through restoration. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time.